Hi, it's Mark Ashley, back with more bankruptcy fun. Today, let's talk about whether you should file a bankruptcy petition without an attorney. Over the last few years, bankruptcy forms have become very specific and are supposed to be debtor-friendly. So why not act as your own attorney and fill out all the forms yourself? Can you successfully file a bankruptcy petition without an attorney? The answer, of course, is yes. You can also represent yourself in your own divorce and give yourself a haircut and make your own clothes and rebuild your own transmission. The point being that even though you may be capable of doing it on your own, is it really worth it to spend all the time necessary to educate yourself and prepare your case, and then maybe still get it wrong and have to redo your paperwork or even lose your assets and your discharge? Of course, you say, this guy's a bankruptcy attorney trying to drum up business for himself. Certainly he's going to recommend that you hire an attorney. Well, there's some truth in that, but I promise to be objective. Chapter 7 is the bankruptcy that most consumer debtors file. Nobody should attempt a pro se Chapter 13. Pro se, by the way, is Latin, which means on your own behalf or representing yourself. Some people say pro per, which is short for impropria persona, also Latin, meaning in their own person. In court, they mean the same thing. Very few do-it-yourself Chapter 13 cases are successful. In fact, there are many bankruptcy attorneys who won't take a Chapter 13 case because of all the moving parts. And some people without an attorney file under the wrong chapter because they didn't know which chapter was the best fit for them. Generally, if you choose to go the do-it-yourself Chapter 7 route, the simpler your case is, the better your chance of success. If you have little or no income, limited assets, don't owe any taxes, and if you don't anticipate any objections from creditors, then your case may be simple enough to try it without an attorney. However, even the simplest bankruptcy requires you to research the law, know the local exemption statutes, follow all the local court rules, prepare all the documents correctly, which are typically about 50 pages, and make all the strategy decisions on your own, and of course, attend the hearings by yourself. Then, even after all that, if you don't have practical bankruptcy experience, you don't know what you don't know. A pro se is expected to know the law. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, and the trustee and judge involved may not cut you any slack just because you don't know the law. The official instructions to the bankruptcy forms state that completing the forms is only part of the bankruptcy process. You're strongly encouraged to hire a qualified attorney not only to help you complete the forms, but also to give you general advice about bankruptcy and to represent you in your bankruptcy case. When you represent yourself, you're responsible for researching the law, following the bankruptcy court rules, preparing and filing all your documents, and making all the decisions in your case, including the very first question of whether or not you really need to file a bankruptcy, and then which chapter you should file. I've spent countless hours in hearing rooms listening to people representing themselves in bankruptcy court and making the same mistakes as thousands of pro se debtors before them. Many of them have made unfixable mistakes that cost them extra money or the loss of assets, and almost all the mistakes could have been avoided had they received good advice before filing their case. Knowing how to do good pre-bankruptcy planning is essential, especially in cases where you may have paid back an IOU to a family member or a friend, or if you have assets that may or may not be exempt, or if you owe taxes to the IRS or state, or if you're expecting tax refunds. If you file a bankruptcy on your own, you'll be required to research and know the same law that an experienced bankruptcy attorney knows. Bankruptcy is an intimidating and time-consuming process, which requires you to fill out several forms, know the law, and appear in court. If you feel uncomfortable with any part of the process, then you should have an experienced bankruptcy attorney guide you through the process. I'm Mark Ashley. Thanks for listening.